Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Caccera, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Caccera.
Welcome in, Joe Caccera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you for those that are following us live on Facebook. We're a little bit late today, so we are going to get started. For those that are following us, again, thank you very much for continuing to follow us on Facebook, grow the audience, share this information with others on Facebook. We appreciate it very much. We will try, as we always do, to try to get as many people as we can to join the show and correspond with the show. Almost 8 years now. We have provided live radio and podcasting for the communities, and we continue to grow. So thank you again for those people that not only view the show, but every once in a while I really like to, I don't want to forget to thank all those that have followed the show and been committed to the show and downloaded thousands of podcasts. We have tens of thousands of podcasts each month downloaded for the show, and I want to just very grateful and appreciative of those that take the time to listen to the show, and I hope that we do our job and continue to provide you value in real estate. The focus is pretty simple for us. It's always been the same, and that's to provide you, the consumer, with education and information in and around real estate to help you make wise decisions in your real estate. So we'll continue to do that. If you have not downloaded the podcast yet, go to iTunes, just type in Real Estate Radio Live. You can go really anywhere online and type in Real Estate Radio Live. You'll find the podcast, or go to our website. That is RERL-1614-Real. That's RERL-1614-Real. The topic today is going to be death and divorce. Death and divorce as it relates to real estate. So most of you know, it sounds like a dark topic subject, but the reality is these things happen. As the next couple of months kind of unfold, I'm going to be very specific about some subjects and topics that I cover, with real estate, as I always do. So we have guests many times. We'll have guests about this. We'll have some estate planning attorneys come in the next couple of months and really cover these types of things and what's so important about that. So today we're going to talk a little bit of first segment. We're going to talk about divorce and how it relates to real estate. Some of the things you have to think about, maybe some of the things you should be planning for. And then in the second part of the show, we are going to talk about death and death as it relates to real estate and property and planning and a lot of different things that happen. And it's not a popular topic. It's not this topic that anyone really wants to listen to, or it's nothing to get excited about, but it's reality, and it is. So we see this every day. We see divorces and how do they affect real estate and how do they affect assets and a lot of different aspects of life. So we want to try to prepare you, not that that's going to happen, but maybe there's friends, family, coworkers that you know. And then death. What happens with real estate? How should you be planning? And so we're going to go through that as well. And then the next couple of months we're going to have a real estate attorney and maybe a divorce attorney on as well to try to really hash out some of these things and go into more detail from a legal perspective. Okay, so on the divorce side, some of the things that you really want to think about, not that, again, I'll preface, no one really goes into marriage and, assets and when you're raising children or not, or when you're investing assets or buying assets or any of these things, no one goes into this thinking, gee, one day I'm going to get divorced. It just doesn't happen. But it does happen, and it happens to a large percentage of people. I don't know what the numbers are. It's 40 or 50%, so that's a big number. That just is. So the reality is, for every transaction that takes place or for every marriage that takes place, somewhere between 40 to 50%, so nearly half end up in a divorce one way or another. So this is real. It happens. And so I want to talk a little bit about it and how it relates to real estate. So the first thing I want to kind of go through is planning. So I'm a big planner, and in general, if you're ever going to take the time and energy and resources to plan, make sure it's around death and divorce and a couple of these topics. And so typically that is covered in a living trust, and sometimes there's different types of trusts. There's revocable, irrevocable. There's a number of different trust that you could put together, and that's up to you and your attorney and your spouse or partners and how you want to do that. But the best thing I could do by starting this conversation and this topic today is plan well. Plan the best you can. And what I mean by that is, if you are married, regardless if you're married or not, but we're talking about a married couple in this case when it comes to divorce, make sure your trust is up to date and make sure it's complete and make sure you currently revisit that every year or so or every couple of years when situations come up, when events in the family take place or changes take place. So, number one, please make sure that you have a trust. A will, I'm telling you, is not good enough. It's just, you've never seen more problems in your life when people pass away or there's a problem with health and there's nothing but a will. It's just, it's the basics, it's simple, and I guess if there's nothing else, that's a good thing to have because it is a document and it will hold up in the court of law, but it's a big problem just to have a will alone by itself. So I would recommend a trust. And if you need advice about a trust attorney, I have several that I would recommend, and I will be happy to do that. If you want to give me a call or email me, I could do that. I have several here in the Silicon Valley that are outstanding. So I would first get a trust. Get that completed and someone you trust, and make sure that you sit down with this person, and the good trust attorney is going to cover everything with you. They're going to cover your assets, your property, the liabilities. There's issues with children, of course, minors, custodians, a lot of different things that go on, executors of the trust. There's a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm not going to go into all that as much as I could say. Just please get a trust and make sure it is complete and make sure it's done with an attorney you trust. Now, all the details are in that trust, so that in the event of a divorce, then of course those are detailed and detailed out. Now, it gets complicated sometimes, and all I will say is you could have whatever you want in a trust, and things could be spelled out pretty clear, but in a divorce, some of that stuff could change. And so what I'm here to tell you is to plan well and plan as early and plan often, but also understand that if you get a divorce, the trust is great to have, but there may be variations to it. And what I mean by that is depending on how the divorce goes, depending on the negotiations, the trust could be, the numbers and the details in the trust could be different. That's all I could say. So the point I want to get across in this segment today is, regardless of you're married or single, but we're talking about, again, divorce today, please make sure that you have an executed trust. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure anytime you buy a new property or there's additional assets or something, there's a major change in your life, children, all these types of things, make sure they're detailed in the trust. Get it updated, get it revised. And then in the event of a divorce, you have the details laid out. Again, it doesn't mean that it's going to go exactly the way that trust reads. It could be that something changes. But this is a real occurrence, and it happens on a regular basis, and I deal with it on a regular basis in my business. And we want to be able to do as professionals, our job is to do the best we can to represent both these people or whatever person you're working with as a professional and give them the best advice and work with other professionals to make the situation the best they can out of a situation in something that comes up like this. I do several refinances on an annual basis where someone will come to me and they'll say, Joe, we're going through a divorce. We're going to need to sell the house. We're going to need to refinance. I'm going to need to take the proceeds from the refinance, and I'm going to need to pay my husband or my wife off. And all these types of things happen. They're real. Again, not a popular topic, but they're real and they happen, so we have to be prepared for them. So the only thing I would say over and above a trust is just make sure that any other properties that you have, something that comes up, there's a change in it. The loans are another story too, which is an entirely different situation. So some couples, one or the two might be on the loan, but both could be on title. That happens sometimes too. So make sure this conversation is had with your estate planning attorney. Sometimes both people are on the loan and both people are on title. Sometimes there's one on the loan and both on title. Sometimes there's more people on title, depending if there's a partnership or maybe if someone else was part of that purchase some time ago. All I'm really going to say, there's not a whole lot of details in this. And the reason I stay away from details is because I'm not an attorney and I'm not a CPA, so I'm not going to give legal advice. I'm not going to give tax advice. All I could say in summary is please make sure that you have a trust. Make sure it's completed to the fullest extent that it can. And then make sure when there's any event that comes up that needs to be updated that you do that with your estate planning attorney. Okay? Now let's talk a little bit about death. In some cases, it's very much the same in terms of what happens to that property or what happens to the asset if someone dies. So this is another thing. I'll say plan well, and plan often. This is another reason for a trust. A little bit different than a divorce because other things are involved in the death. Other things are involved, for instance, if you're a couple and one person dies, then it's spelled out pretty clear in the trust, and it's fairly simple in that usually all the assets and everything associated with that trust goes to the living spouse or living partner. Or living, in that situation, it depends. If it's one parent, let's say, or a grandparent, then it could be distributed amongst children, grandchildren, and things like that. So those are variations are different. But make sure, this happens oftentimes too, you establish a trust as a couple, and then one of the partners or maybe the spouse dies. So again, if that happens, you need to update your trust and have exactly where those assets and where the money and where any kind of property is going to be distributed amongst the next person if that person dies and when they die. Because that changes now. If one of the couples or one of the spouses passes away, there has to be a place where the property, assets, and everything goes in the event of another death of that person if they're now single. The other flip side I've seen happen before is some people will have a trust and they're single, and then they get married and they forget to go back and revise the trust as a married couple. And this happens sometimes too, so make sure you do that. It's not always the flip side. It happens on both sides of the coin here. So in the event of a death, the reason why, again, this is really one of the most critical pieces with the trust, there is so much involved, especially if you have parents, grandparents, children, all these different people involved. If you don't have a trust, you could have a situation where if you have a will or no will at all, that it's held up in probate, and it could be years. I've seen this before. It could be years that you get any kind of resolution on that property or any kind of assets by that person if this person passes away and there is no specific trust. Another problem that comes up is that the trusts aren't updated. I've seen this happen before. I have seen people who thought their trust was updated, someone passes away, and they just realized that it was not updated. And that could be problematic as well. I've also seen situations where people know they're going to pass away. It's a sad situation. I was part of it as one of a good friends of mine 4 or 5 years ago. He knew he was probably going to pass away in a short period of time, maybe months, no more than a year. He called an executor in. It wasn't me. It was another friend of his. He called him in, and they made changes to the trust. That did not go over well when he passed away. He made changes to the trust based on dynamics that had changed in his personal life towards the end of his life. And the only reason I bring these up is because these are real and they happen. And a lot of people think, oh, it's not going to happen to me, or I don't really worry about it. I'm too young. I won't die, or nothing will happen. I mean, hopefully you're right, and hopefully it doesn't. But the reality is things happen, and death and divorce do happen. And they're not popular topics, but they're important. They're important to understand, and they're important to really figure out how they impact everybody involved. So, to summarize again, make sure you have a trust. Make sure you update the trust. Any kind of changes, make sure that you sit down and go through the details of that. Be very specific about that. Typically, they have executors. Typically, they have where the money goes or where the asset goes in the event of a death. They're very specific, and that's the reason for the trust, so that you avoid any kind of disputes, you avoid any kind of probate, you avoid any kind of, someone coming forward and saying, hey, wait a minute, that person verbally told me they were going to give me X amount of money at their death. Believe me or not, This stuff happens. One of the most frustrating things to me, I see it on a fairly regular basis. One of the most frustrating things to me is when someone dies and all of a sudden you see a bunch of vultures surrounding or kind of, surrounding, unfortunately, the body of this person. I know that sounds terrible, but it happens. Money does weird things to people. Money does very disturbing things to people sometimes. It's sad, but it's true. Money changes people. Sometimes people think they're owed something. I've seen this happen within my own family. I've seen it happen with friends, relatives, coworkers. All of a sudden someone dies, and then you have fights amongst siblings, family members, aunts, uncles, grandparents. I've seen it. It's terrible, but it's real. And sometimes it gets ugly, and sometimes there's huge conflicts that people end up talking to each other the rest of their life because of it, because of money in some cases. It's ridiculous. To me, it's ridiculous. I've always said, and I might hurt someone's feelings when I say this, if you can't go out and make your own money or make your own living, and you have to wait or you feel like you need to wait till someone passes away to gain money or gain some kind of additional status, I mean, just the thought of that, just if someone's thinking, if that's a mindset, to me that's problematic. And that's just me. And this is an unpopular topic sometimes because a lot of people, especially when they're children or they've been around somewhere for a while or they're a grandparent, or a lot of family members become entitled. So there's an entitled feeling. And I'm not going to do a Dr. Phil session here, but this is like an entitled, I see it all the time, right? You could be a relative or close relative or someone, or you think you're close, and you have a different perception of that. And remember, not everybody shares their trust, the details of their trust with everyone. So invariably what happens, sometimes someone will pass away, and then, there may be a mass rush to the attorney's office for people to see what they have coming, or they think they have something coming. And sometimes people are surprised because they think they had something coming and they don't. Other times people are surprised because they thought they had X amount coming and they're getting more or less. What's sad is this is about money and assets. And what's sad is that I've seen families torn apart, arguments and disruptions for money and assets of someone passing away. The grieving doesn't even take place before people are worrying about this stuff. To me, it's very frustrating. It's sad. I see it on a regular basis. And the reason I bring this up and the reason I talk about this, it may be unpopular to some people, but it's real and it's true. I see it all the time. Ask anyone that deals with this. Ask a divorce attorney. Ask attorneys that deal with this, estate planning. They see some of the ugliest things take place when people pass away. It's sad. It really is. And I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it happens enough. And the reason I'm reminding everybody of this is because it's super, super important. I can't express enough. Get a living trust, and there's a couple different forms, different types, I should say. Make sure you sit down with a qualified trust attorney. Lay all the details out in the event of divorce or death and any other things. Some people deal with other issues with their children or minors and they happen to pass away, or they, just in case they pass away, who's the custodian, who's helping these children. A lot of different things take place in the trust. So, in summary, as it relates to real estate and assets, please make sure those things are taken care of. If you do need a referral for an estate planning attorney, we have 2 or 3. Matter of fact, if you go to our website, RERL-1614-Real, that's RERL-1614-Real.com, you'll be able to see 2 or 3 trust attorneys or attorneys that are very capable of handling trust. They're outstanding. I wouldn't have them on the website if I didn't trust them. They do a great job. If you have any questions for me, or if you want other referrals, or if there's other situations that you need, as always, I could help you with real estate agents, CPAs, trust attorneys, real estate attorneys, plumbers, electricians, anything to do with real estate. Really, we have a great network of people to help you with. Again, as I close out today, the unfortunate part is death is real and it happens and it's sad, but you have to be the best prepared for you can. Divorce is the same. A lot of people don't like to discuss it. A lot of people like to avoid the potentials or the possibilities of it, but it's real and it happens every day. So all I would say today is be prepared, plan well, and plan often when any of these things come up. And as always, reach out to us. Even more importantly, make sure you reach out to a professional and someone that has an area of expertise in this type of thing. And that would include the following. I would include the following experts or professionals when putting together a trust. I would include your financial advisor in the planning of this and your CPA, because there's tax implications typically and there's financial implications when something like this happens in life. All right? This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you again for tuning in today. We appreciate that very much. For more information, you could always go to RERL-1614-Real. And always feel free to reach out to me, as most people do during the week. If you have any questions, concerns, any way I could help you, 408-838-9060. Take care. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.